We're going to move on to Connor's question next. He says, I am 23 and looking to buy a home in 5 to 7 years. My employer matches 7% of my 401k plus 10% profit sharing every year. If I include those numbers in my savings, can I save the rest for a down payment?
Man, that's pretty ballin'. The 7%, is that like a matching contribution? You say match?
It says my employer matches 7%.
10% profit sharing.
Yeah.
Oh, he said 7% match. The 5 to 7 was how many years I was about the house. I think 7% match, 10% profit sharing. So if
he's investing 7%, getting the match for 7%, and getting 10% profit
employer's
share.
putting in 17, he's putting in another 7 to get the match. So he's at 24%. If you get to include the employer numbers, I think, Brian, it'd be interesting to talk, and I'd love to hear you talk about this. Can I include the employer contributions? That's kind of the first question. And when can I and when can I not? Here's what I think is really interesting about your situation, Connor. I love that you're having this like planning thought process. You're 23. You didn't say, hey, I'm trying to buy a house this summer, or hey, next month I want to get into a house. You said, I recognize that buying a house is a huge and significant financial decision. So I want to plan for the next 5 to 7 years to figure out how I can do that well. Because I know some prep and some work needs to go into being ready to purchase a home. Right there on the start, that already suggests to me that you are setting yourself up for success because you're thinking about it the right way. So now to his question, can he include those numbers, just save the 24%, and save the rest in cash for the house?
Yeah, as long as your income, I always talk about the safety net, the social safety net. It's really Social Security. 23-year-old, I don't even know if we even need to be thinking about that, but it's still, just so you know the logic of what goes into our reasoning on this, is that when people are in a lower income situation, then yes, I think that you're going to be closer to the social safety net, so you can include the employer's contribution, because I already know how hard it is to save money just in general, because you're covering all your housing and life expenses as well. But as you get more and more income, the responsibility also grows on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. So that's why I use the number, if your income is for a household is under $200,000, then you can include the employer match. Now, I feel like I ought to put an asterisk on somebody who's 23 years of age, is that 7% to get 24, that sounds like, man, that's so great, but you're so close to the starting line that just one change in your scenario, like losing your job or your employer getting on hard times and cutting off the funding. So I don't want you to go expand your lifestyle, because that's really what I'm worried about before you've got the foundational behaviors that are working for you. So I feel like there's almost like a footnote or an asterisk I'd have to put on this rule, especially for young people who are under 30. I think that rule still ought to encourage you to get up to a minimum of 15% of saving and investing for your future, because it just feels a little neglectful because your employer is so generous, and you should go give your employer a big hug and say thank you for being so generous, because I think that is very noble that they're doing that. But that shouldn't take away your responsibility to be an active participant in your success, especially at such a young age. So I would love for you still to aspire to get to 15% of your own personal savings and investment rate. And then, yes, of course, above that point with this generous employer match, I think that if you having a goal of saving for housing or other things, you can start moving on to filling up those buckets. Yeah,
the only two things that I'll add to that is inside of that, I think one of the things I'd love for a young person to really consider is looking at your Roth IRA. You're obviously doing the 401k, and maybe you're doing the Roth side, but you can also save into a Roth IRA. So that's a great tool for you to use at a young age. If you want to know where that falls in the financial order of operations, do you have the thing? You can go to moneyguy.com/resources, check that out. Here's another little financial mutant hack for you. You said that you want to be able to buy a house in the next 5 to 7 years. Well, that's not exactly short term. I'd argue that's kind of like intermediate term. Cash right now is fantastic, and it's paying 5%, which is awesome. But I would argue 5 to 7 years of an undefined time frame, I don't even think it'd be crazy, as you're even thinking about building up for that house fund, if some portion of that was going to cash, but some portion was going in a dollar cost averaging strategy into like a low cost index fund. Because if you give yourself 5 to 7 years, there's a really good chance that the index that you're utilizing will likely outpace cash over a 5 to 7 year period. So you might can have a best of both worlds as you're working towards that goal.
But don't forget, still use FU as your foundation, because you can probably boost up your cash reserves to reflect. Get the Roth IRA like Bo was talking about, all within, because your first house, we give you that grace of 3 to 5% down. So I think you're going to be able to check every one of those boxes, and it's pretty exciting stuff for you, Connor, at 23 years of age.